Welcome to KNN. KNN is brought to you by Bob Knakal, Chairman of New York Investment Sales at JLL.
Hi, I'm Jon Hageman, Managing Director at JLL. Welcome to KNN. Today I'm here with Bob Knakal, Chairman of New York Investment Sales, and today we're going to talk about the first quarter 2022 investment sales numbers in the outer boroughs. Bob, in the previous episode we talked about the first quarter statistics in Manhattan. Today we're going to talk about the first quarter statistics in the outer boroughs, but just quickly, why don't we do a recap of what we saw in Manhattan in the first quarter?
Yeah, absolutely, Hags, and I'll say that it's important to know what's going on in Manhattan because typically what happens in New York City will happen in Manhattan first, and then the outer boroughs catches on. In first quarter 22 in Manhattan, we had 55 properties sold. That's on pace for 220 for the year, and again, these are investment sales over $10 million. So that 220 sale pace in Manhattan is up about 15% from where it was in 2021. There were 191 sales back in 21. If we look at dollar volume, the dollar volume was $8.6 billion in the first quarter, on pace for $34.4 billion. That would be up 118% from where we were in 2021. So the numbers in Manhattan really are looking great. We're getting a lot of traction, things picking up. The fourth quarter of 21 and first quarter of 22, 8.6 billion and 8.6 billion, the two best back-to-back quarters we've had, going all the way back to the second and third quarter of 2016. So, things in Manhattan are really going well.
So that's great. With that, why don't we talk about what we saw in the outer boroughs in the first quarter?
Sure. In the outer boroughs, we've seen that things are starting to pick up a little bit, but not quite to the extent they are in Manhattan. So, Hags, in the first quarter of 2022 in the outer boroughs, and the outer boroughs include northern Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, and the Bronx, there was $1.78 billion of sales volume. If we annualize that, the pace of $6.82 billion would be down about 8.7% from the $7.47 billion that we had last year. And if we look at that compared to the peak of the market in the outer boroughs in 2016, it was actually the peak of the dollar volume when we had $12.6 billion in sales. We're down about 46% from where we were at the peak.
So that being the dollar volume in the outer boroughs in the first quarter, what about the number of properties sold?
Well, from a positive note, the number of properties sold was performing much better than dollar volume was. And we always look at number of properties sold more indicative of activity, and especially in the outer boroughs. And if we looked at properties selling under $10 million, the numbers probably would be even more positive. But if we look at the sales that occurred in the outer boroughs over $10 million in the first quarter, we see that there were 56 properties sold. If we annualize that, we're on pace for about 216. And that pace would be up about 28.6% from where we were in 2021. And again, for reference, to compare that to where we were at the peak of the market, which occurred in 2015 in the outer boroughs in terms of number of properties sold, we're down about 43.6% from where we were at that peak.
So Bob, one of the things you just mentioned was that we usually see market activity happen first, or market trends rather, happen first in Manhattan and then spread to the outer boroughs. Why don't you talk a little bit more about that from a historical perspective?
Yeah, well, Hags, that's something that we've seen, over decades, that whenever there's a shift in the market, whether that shift is a downward shift or an upward shift, the numbers tend to move in Manhattan before they move in the outer boroughs. So the fact that we've had such positive traction in Manhattan for the last couple of quarters, and now we're starting to see it seep into the outer boroughs, that's a very, very positive thing, and I think bodes very well for where we think activity in the outer boroughs is going to go moving forward. Particularly if you look at a couple of segments of the market that have done very well, industrial clearly is on fire. And although industrial makes up such a small slice of the market in New York City, there's more industrial in the outer boroughs than there is in Manhattan. And also, the multifamily sector is also doing really, really well. And we know how the outer boroughs are chock full of apartment buildings. And so traction in that space has also helped the numbers very, very much. So based upon what we're seeing from a macro perspective, we would expect that this tremendous traction we have in Manhattan is seeping into the outer boroughs, and this should be a really great year as we move further into 2022 for the outer boroughs.